The gleaming spires of New Geneva's Interspecies Research Center pierced the morning mist as Dr. Sarah Chen adjusted her lab coat. The facility represented humanity's greatest achievement in diplomatic relations with alien species, though today felt different. Today, they would welcome their first Laserian researcher. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she reviewed the dossier. The Laserians were one of the most advanced civilizations in known space, their biological research centuries ahead of Earth's. Yet they rarely shared their knowledge, preferring to observe rather than interact. Until now. The transport beam shimmed into existence, its purple light casting strange shadows across the pristine white walls. From within emerged Dr. Zora Val, her crystalline skin refracting the morning sunlight into tiny rainbows. Her eyes, with their distinctive double pupils, took in the laboratory with calm curiosity. "Welcome to Earth, Dr. Val," Sarah said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'm Dr. Chen, head of xenobiology research." Zara's head tilted slightly, a gesture Sarah would later learn indicated interest. "Your facility is surprisingly advanced, Dr. Chen. Perhaps the Council's assessment of human scientific progress requires updating." The slight pause in Zora's statement wasn't lost on Sarah. Like many alien species, the Laserians tended to view humans as primitive, barely out of their technological infancy. Sarah had fought against such prejudices throughout her career. "We may surprise you," Sarah replied diplomatically. "Shall we begin with a tour of our genetic sequencing department?" As they walked through the facility, Sarah noticed how Zora's movements seemed to flow like liquid crystal, each step precise yet ethereal. The Laserian scientist stopped at every workstation, her double-pupilled eyes drinking in the details of human research methods. "Your species approaches genetics uniquely," Zora observed, examining a holographic display of human DNA. "You seek to understand through modification, through trial and error. We prefer to observe the natural order. Sometimes the best way to understand something is to see how it can change," Sarah countered, bringing up her latest research project. "This is my work on adaptive genetic responses to extreme environments." Zara's crystalline skin flickered with colors. Surprise, Sarah would later learn. "You've managed to isolate environmental adaptation triggers without quantum sequencing." "We have our methods," Sarah said, allowing herself a small smile. Different doesn't always mean inferior. The day progressed with a dance of questions and answers, each scientist carefully probing the other's knowledge. Sarah found herself fascinated by Zora's descriptions of Laserian biology, how their crystalline bodies could absorb and process energy directly from their binary star system, how their genetic structure existed in a quantum state that allowed for instant adaptation. "There is one aspect of human biology that particularly interests me," Zara said as they shared a meal in the facility's cafeteria. Sarah eating synthesized protein, Zora absorbing mineral solutions through her crystalline matrix. "Your reproductive process. Is it true that you require direct physical contact?" Sarah nearly choked on her food. "Well, yes, though there's much more to human relationships than just reproduction." "Fascinating." Zara's skin rippled with iridescent patterns. "On Lissar, we simply share genetic patterns through quantum entanglement. The concept of physical mating seems inefficient." "Efficiency isn't everything," Sarah found herself saying. "Sometimes the journey matters more than the destination." Zara's expression shifted in a way Sarah couldn't quite interpret. Perhaps you could explain more about these human relationships. From a scientific perspective, of course." As Sarah began to explain, she realized this cultural exchange might be more significant than either of their species had anticipated. Here were two worlds, two completely different approaches to life itself, finding common ground in their curiosity about each other. The first day of many ended with both scientists having more questions than answers. As Zora prepared to return to her quarters in the alien diplomatic section, she turned to Sarah. "I believe I may have been incorrect in my initial assessment, Dr. Chen. Humans are indeed primitive compared to my species in many ways, but your primitiveness has led you to discoveries we never considered. Perhaps there is much we can learn from each other." Sarah smiled. "That's the whole point of science, isn't it? To learn, to discover, to understand." As she watched Zora's crystalline form disappear into the transport beam, Sarah couldn't help but feel that this was the beginning of something revolutionary. Two species, separated by biology, culture, and countless light years, finding connection through their shared pursuit of knowledge. Little did either scientist know that their collaboration would soon challenge both their species' understanding of life, love, and the very nature of existence itself. 2 weeks into their collaboration, Sarah found herself spending more time in the lab than ever before. The Lysarian approach to genetics was revolutionary, even if Zora's methods sometimes seemed like magic rather than science. Today, they were attempting to bridge their two species' approaches to genetic research. "Your crystalline structure," Sarah mused, examining the latest scan results. "It doesn't just store genetic information. It processes it in real time, doesn't it?" Zora's skin rippled with approval, sending cascades of rainbow light across the laboratory walls. "Correct. We exist in a constant state of quantum flux. It allows us to adapt to environmental changes instantly." She paused, her double pupils focusing intently on Sarah. "Though I find your species' method of genetic preservation equally fascinating. The way you pass down traits through generations, allowing for natural selection and evolution. It's beautifully chaotic." Sarah laughed, a sound that still startled Zora. Lysarians expressed amusement through color changes, not sound. Beautifully chaotic. That's humanity in a nutshell. Their current project involved studying the possibility of incorporating Lysarian quantum adaptation capabilities into human medical treatments. The implications for treating genetic diseases were staggering, but the work was delicate and complex. "Watch this," Sarah said, inputting commands into the genetic sequencer. The holographic display showed a strand of modified human DNA beginning to exhibit quantum properties. "If we can stabilize this state..." The strand suddenly collapsed, the quantum field dissolving into random noise. Sarah sighed in frustration, but Zora moved closer, her crystalline form humming with excitement. "You don't understand what you've achieved," Zora said, her voice vibrating with intensity. "No other species has ever managed to induce quantum properties in their genetic structure. The Council believed it was impossible for carbon-based life forms." Sarah felt a warmth in her chest at the praise, but more than that, she felt the thrill of scientific discovery. "Maybe that's our advantage," she said thoughtfully. "We don't know what's impossible, so we try anyway." As they worked, Sarah noticed how Zora had begun adopting more human gestures, nodding her head, using her hands to emphasize points. Similarly, Sarah found herself more attuned to the subtle color changes in Zora's crystalline form that indicated her emotions. During their lunch break, Zora brought up a topic that had clearly been on her mind. "Your species forms strong emotional bonds," she observed, "not just for mating, but for friendship, family, collaboration." "Why?" Sarah considered the question carefully. "We're social creatures. Those bonds help us survive, help us grow. Haven't you ever had someone you felt connected to, beyond just scientific collaboration?" Zora's form flickered with uncertainty. "Lysarians join minds for research or reproduction, but we maintain our individuality. These human bonds you speak of, they seem inefficient, messy." Yet, her color shifted to a deep blue that Sarah had never seen before. "Yet I find myself experiencing unfamiliar sensations during our work together. A desire to spend more time in your presence, to understand your perspective. Is this what you call friendship?" The question touched Sarah deeply. "Yes, I think it is. And you know what? It might be messy and inefficient, but those connections have driven some of humanity's greatest achievements." Their conversation was interrupted by an alert from the genetic sequencer. The latest test had produced unexpected results. The modified human DNA wasn't just exhibiting quantum properties, it was maintaining them. "This is unprecedented," Zara whispered, her form pulsing with excited colors. "The implications. We need to run more tests," Sarah said, already moving to the equipment. "If we can replicate this." They worked through the night, neither willing to stop. The breakthrough was too important, too revolutionary. As they analyzed the results, Sarah realized something else was happening. They were proving that two radically different species could not just coexist, but create something new together. As morning light began filtering through the laboratory windows, Sarah turned to Sarah. "I need to submit a report to the council," she said, her tone serious. "This discovery, it challenges many of our fundamental beliefs about species compatibility and evolution." "Will that be a problem?" Sarah asked, suddenly concerned. She'd heard about the Lizarian Council's conservative views on interspecies collaboration. "It might be," Zara admitted, her crystalline form dimming slightly. "But as you humans say, sometimes the most important discoveries are the ones that make us uncomfortable." Sarah placed a hand near Zara's arm, not touching. She knew Lizarians were sensitive about physical contact, but offering support nonetheless. "Whatever happens, we'll face it together. That's what friends do." Zara's form brightened, colors swirling in a pattern Sarah had come to recognize as joy. Perhaps there is something to these human bonds after all. As they prepared to send their findings to both their respective authorities, neither scientist fully grasped how their discovery would shake the foundations of both their societies. Their work wasn't just about genetic breakthroughs anymore. It was about proving that the gap between their species could be bridged, one scientific discovery at a time. The response from the Lizarian Council arrived 3 days after Sarah and Zara submitted their findings. The laboratory's atmosphere grew tense as Zara's crystalline form dimmed to an almost gray shade while reading the transmission. "They're shutting us down," Zara said, her usually melodic voice flat. "The Council believes our research represents an unacceptable risk to Lizarian genetic purity. They're ordering my immediate return." Sarah felt her heart sink. "But our breakthrough could revolutionize medical treatment for both our species. Surely they can see that." The Council, Zara's form flickered with barely contained frustration, believes that quantum genetic manipulation should remain exclusively Lizarian. They fear that sharing this knowledge could lead to humans developing capabilities that might threaten our species' supremacy. The Human Scientific Board's response wasn't much better. While they didn't outright reject the research, they demanded immediate military oversight, seeing the potential for weaponization. The pure scientific pursuit Sarah and Zara had envisioned was being twisted by fear and politics on both sides. "I won't give up," Sarah declared, her jaw set with determination. "We've come too far to let fear stop us now." Zara's color shifted to a deep purple, a sign of conflict. "Sarah, you don't understand. Defying the Council, it's not just about losing my position. They could revoke my genetic rights, prevent me from contributing to future generations. My entire lineage could be terminated." Sarah paused her furious typing, truly processing what Zara was saying. The concept of genetic rights was fundamental to Lizarian society. It was more than just reproduction. It was their very identity, their future. "Then we need to prove them wrong," Sarah said finally, not through defiance, but through results they can't ignore. Over the next few days, they worked tirelessly, knowing their time together might be limited. Sarah noticed how Zara's movements became more human-like as the pressure mounted, running her crystalline hands through her luminescent hair-like filaments, pacing the lab in straight lines rather than her usual flowing patterns. Their breakthrough came unexpectedly. While reviewing their previous results, Sarah noticed something in the quantum field readings. "Zara, look at this. The quantum state isn't just stable, it's resonating with the base genetic code. It's like they're harmonizing." Zara's form literally lit up as she analyzed the data. "This is incredible. The human genetic structure isn't just accepting the quantum properties, it's enhancing them, creating something entirely new." They worked through the night, documenting every aspect of their discovery. This wasn't just about combining their technologies anymore. They were witnessing the birth of an entirely new field of science. As morning approached, they were interrupted by an urgent message from the facility's security. A Lysarian diplomatic vessel had entered Earth's orbit, demanding Zara's immediate return. "They're not going to listen to us, are they?" Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer. Zara's form pulsed with determination. "Perhaps not to us individually, but they'll have to listen to this." She gestured to their results. "What we've discovered here isn't just about genetics or quantum states. It's proof that our species can do more together than apart." Sarah felt a surge of pride and something else, something deeper. "You know, when we first met, you thought humans were primitive, and you thought Lysarians were cold and distant," Zara countered, her color shifting to a warm golden hue Sarah had never seen before. "We were both wrong in our own ways." The facility's lights suddenly shifted to red. The diplomatic vessel was initiating landing procedures. They had minutes at most. "Whatever happens," Sarah said, quickly compiling their research data, "I want you to know that working with you has been the most incredible experience of my career." Zara's form shimmed with colors that defied description. "Sarah, in studying human bonds, I believe I've developed one of my own. Our connection, it transcends mere scientific collaboration." Before Sarah could respond, the laboratory doors slid open. A delegation of Lysarian officials entered, their crystalline forms rigid and austere. Behind them came human military representatives, their expressions equally stern. But Sarah and Zara stood their ground, their research displayed proudly behind them. They had discovered something revolutionary, not just in genetics, but in proving that two vastly different species could come together to create something greater than themselves. As the officials approached, Sarah and Zara exchanged a look. They knew that what they had started here couldn't be stopped by politics or fear. Their work had planted a seed of change that would continue to grow, challenging both their species to look beyond their differences and see the potential that lay in unity. The laboratory had become a diplomatic battleground. Lysarian officials stood like crystalline statues, their forms emanating disapproval, while human military personnel positioned themselves strategically around the room. The tension was palpable. "Dr. Val," the lead Lysarian official's voice resonated with authority, "you have violated council directives regarding genetic knowledge sharing. Your research license is hereby revoked." "With respect, council member," Zara's form pulsed with controlled intensity, "our discoveries here transcend traditional boundaries. We've achieved what was thought impossible." Sarah stepped forward, drawing surprised looks from both sides. "If I may, we've documented evidence of successful quantum genetic integration. The implications for medical advancement alone." Silence. The Lysarian official cut her off. "Human opinion holds no weight in council matters." The human military commander, Colonel Hayes, cleared his throat. "Actually, as this research was conducted on Earth, under Earth jurisdiction, we have equal claim to any discoveries made here." The situation was deteriorating rapidly, but before anyone could respond, emergency alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Dr. Wong, Sarah's colleague, burst into the room, his face pale. "The quantum field containment in Lab B is failing," he gasped. "The experimental samples, they're generating some kind of cascade effect." Sarah and Zara exchanged alarmed looks. They had been running long-term stability tests on their quantum-modified genetic samples in the isolated lab. If the containment failed, the quantum resonance could spread. Zara explained quickly, her form flickering with urgency. It could affect all genetic material within range, including living tissue. "How far?" Colonel Hayes demanded. "At the current rate of expansion, the entire facility within 20 minutes. The surrounding city within an hour." The Lysarian officials' forms dimmed with horror. Quantum genetic manipulation on this scale was unprecedented and potentially catastrophic. "We need to act now," Sarah said firmly. "Zara, if we combine your quantum manipulation abilities with our containment technology." "Absolutely not. The Lysarian official interrupted. Dr. Val, you will return to the ship immediately. This is a human problem now. With respect, council member. Zara's voice carried a steel Sarah had never heard before. I am the only one here capable of manipulating quantum genetic fields. If we don't stop this now, both humans and Lysarians will suffer the consequences. Without waiting for permission, Sarah and Zara rushed to the containment lab. Through the observation window, they could see the swirling vortex of quantum energy growing larger by the second. The field is already affecting the cellular structure of nearby organic material, Sarah reported, checking the readings. We need to stabilize it before it reaches critical mass. Zara's crystalline form began to glow intensely. I can attempt to manipulate the quantum field, but I'll need an anchor point, something to help me channel and control the energy. Sarah looked at the readings, then at her friend. Use me. Sarah, no. The quantum exposure could alter your genetic structure permanently. Or worse. We don't have time to argue. You need an organic anchor, and I understand this research better than anyone else here. Behind them, both human and Lysarian officials watched in stunned silence as Sarah stepped into the containment chamber's antechamber. Zara followed, her form pulsing with worried colors. Ready? Sarah asked, extending her hand. For the first time since they'd met, Zara reached out and made physical contact with Sarah. The sensation was electric, like touching a star made of ice and fire. Zara began channeling her quantum manipulation abilities through Sarah, using her friend's genetic structure as a template to stabilize the wild quantum field. Sarah gasped as she felt the energy flow through her, every cell in her body singing with otherworldly power. The swirling vortex of quantum energy began to contract, drawn toward their joined connection. Zara's crystalline form blazed like a supernova, while Sarah's skin began to emit a faint opalescent glow. It's working, Sarah managed through gritted teeth. The field is stabilizing. Just a little more. Zara's voice was strained as she guided the chaotic energy into a controlled state. With a final surge of power that made every piece of equipment in the lab short out, the quantum field collapsed in on itself, contained once more. The emergency lights cast an eerie glow over the scene as Sarah and Zara collapsed to their knees, still holding onto each other. Medical teams rushed in, but stopped short when they saw them. Sarah's skin now had a subtle crystalline quality to it, catching light in impossible ways. Zara's form had taken on some distinctly organic patterns, swirling beneath her crystalline surface. The head Lysarian official stepped forward, their form radiating astonishment. This is unprecedented. You've achieved true quantum organic synthesis. No, Zara corrected, helping Sarah to her feet. We've proved that our differences aren't barriers, they're bridges. Everything we've discovered here, everything we've become, it's because we work together, not apart. Colonel Hayes nodded slowly. I think both our peoples have some reevaluating to do. As the medical teams finally approached to check them over, Sarah and Zara shared a look of understanding. They had done more than save the facility. They had shown that the future belonged to those willing to reach across the divide and embrace new possibilities. 3 months after the containment incident, the New Geneva Interspecies Research Center had changed dramatically. The once sterile halls now housed both human and Lysarian scientists, working side by side in newly designed laboratories that accommodated both species' needs. Sarah stood before the Interstellar Scientific Coalition, her slightly crystalline-tinged skin catching the light as she presented their findings. Beside her, Zara's form pulsed with quiet pride, the organic patterns in her crystalline structure now a permanent reminder of their shared experience. As you can see, Sarah gestured to the holographic display. The quantum organic synthesis we achieved wasn't just a fluke. It represents an entirely new branch of science, one that combines the best aspects of both our species' approaches to genetic research. The audience, composed of the most prominent scientists from a dozen different species, watched in rapt attention as Zara took over the presentation. The implications extend far beyond mere genetic manipulation, Zara explained, her voice carrying the subtle warmth that had developed since their merger. We're seeing applications in medicine, environmental adaptation, and even space exploration. The changes in both of them had become a subject of fascination for both human and Lysarian scientists. Sarah's enhanced cellular structure allowed her to process information at quantum speeds, while Zara had developed an unprecedented understanding of organic emotional responses. They had become living proof that evolution could be guided by cooperation rather than competition. After the presentation, they walked through the research center's new quantum organic garden, where plants with crystalline properties grew alongside flowers that seemed to shine from within. The Lysarian Council is officially repealing their restrictions on interspecies research, Zara announced, her form shifting through happy colors. Your Earth governments are doing the same, I hear. Sarah nodded, touching one of the crystal flowers. It chimed softly in response. The military oversight has been replaced with an international scientific committee. They finally understand that this is bigger than any one species' agenda. We've come a long way from when I first arrived, Zara mused. I thought humans were primitive, limited by their organic nature. And I thought Lysarians were cold, incapable of true connection. Sarah laughed. We were both so wrong. They reached their favorite spot in the garden, a bench overlooking the hybrid ecosystem they'd helped create. The setting sun cast rainbow refractions through Zara's crystalline form, creating patterns that danced across Sarah's subtly shimmering skin. The next group of exchange scientists arrives tomorrow, Sarah said. Humans and Lysarians, ready to learn from each other from the start this time. Along with representatives from 3 other species, Zara added, our work has sparked quite the revolution in interspecies cooperation. Their success had indeed sparked a change throughout known space. The proven benefits of quantum organic synthesis had opened doors that once seemed permanently closed. Disease resistance, environmental adaptation, even the possibility of surviving in previously inhospitable environments, all were becoming reality. Have you thought about the expedition? Zara asked suddenly. The Interstellar Scientific Coalition had proposed a long-term research mission to explore the possibilities of their discovery in different environments. Leading a team of human and Lysarian scientists to the outer colonies, Sarah smiled. How could I refuse? Especially with you as co-leader. Zara's form brightened. We make a good team. Better than either of us could have imagined. A group of young scientists, both human and Lysarian, passed by, deep in discussion about their latest project. Sarah and Zara watched them with satisfaction, remembering their own initial awkward attempts at collaboration. You know, Sarah said thoughtfully, when we first started working together, we were just trying to understand each other's biology. But we ended up discovering something far more important. Oh, Zara's form rippled with curiosity. And what was that? That the greatest breakthroughs happen when we stop seeing our differences as barriers and start seeing them as opportunities. Every species has something unique to offer, something that can push the boundaries of what's possible. Zara's form pulsed with agreement. Perhaps that's the real quantum leap we achieved, not in genetics or biology, but in understanding. As the sun set over New Geneva, casting its light through the crystal organic gardens, Sarah and Zara continued planning their next adventure. They had started as 2 scientists from vastly different worlds, trying to bridge an impossible gap. Now they stood as living proof that the universe's greatest mysteries could be solved when different species worked together, learning from each other, growing together. Their story had become more than just a scientific breakthrough. It had become a beacon of hope for future generations, showing that the path to the stars was best traveled together, each species contributing its unique strengths to the journey of discovery. In the end, they had discovered that the true frontier wasn't in space or in genetics, but in the connections we forge across the seemingly impossible divides that separate us. And in that discovery lay the key to humanity's next great adventure among the stars.